uncertain human certainty. Have we had that experience? Do we find ourselves struggling between what we desire and what actually then takes place at times? I think I love Peter as much for his weaknesses as I do for his strengths, because it reveals that there is hope for me. Peter's sincere, good intentions, as well as his failings, make evident how the love and grace of God work in accepting, encouraging, and molding a life striving to remain close to Him. This was now, as we continue through Jesus' discussion with His disciples, there the night before going to the garden and being arrested. Judas has left their midst, and Jesus is focusing on encouraging the other disciples. And this is now the time for Jesus, but not for Peter, not for the other disciples. This is Jesus' time, as we noted in John 13:1, where now before the feast of the Passover, when Jesus knew that his hour had come to depart out of this world with the Father, having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. But here in John 13 and verse 36, we read, Simon Peter said to him, Lord, where are you going? Jesus answered him, where I am going, you cannot follow me now, but you will follow afterward. This is the now for Jesus, or this was the now for Jesus. But Peter wanted to know where. Wanted to know what Jesus had meant in verse 33, when Jesus had said, as we noted last week, little children, yet a little while I am with you. You will seek me, and just as I said to the Jews, so now I also say to you, where I am going, you cannot come. Peter was struggling to understand, as all of the disciples were. Despite Jesus having alluded to his death on more than one occasion. We find his references in Luke 9, verses 21 to 22 and verse 44. Also Luke 13, verse 33. Luke 18, verses 31 to 33. As well as in John's Gospel, John chapter 2 and verses 19 to 21. And neither Peter nor the other disciples seem to have understood the Lord's death as being a part of the divine plan. Perhaps their minds were still pondering, like many of the Jews and like the leadership, a physical kingdom. And if that is the case, wouldn't Jerusalem be the center of that kingdom? So where was Jesus planning to go? And later, they would remember these things, as John 2:22 stated, in remembering Jesus' references to his death. The cross was to be followed by his rising. He would die, and ultimately he would go to prepare a place for them. But for Peter, the now was not yet. What one writer states, what our Savior had said to the Jews in John 7:33 to 34, possibly in wrath, and to the disciples in love, he now says to Peter with a qualification and a promise. The Jews would die in their sins, and where Christ is, they should never come. But Peter can follow not now, but afterwards. Peter still had a mission to fulfill. In Luke chapter 22 and verses 31 to 32, as Jesus and Peter were interacting there, we read, Simon, Simon, behold, Satan demanded to have you, that he might sift you like wheat. But I have prayed for you, that your faith may not fail. And when you have returned, or when you have turned again, strengthen your brothers. Here, alluding to his departure, to his falling, to his struggle, but also acknowledging his turning back, and that there was still a role to play in encouraging and strengthening the brothers. Peter, as all of us, had a mixture of weaknesses and strength. Two conflicting forces here, as in Jesus' statement, were focused on him. One trying to destroy him, and the other trying to save him. Satan wanted to sift him like wheat, but Jesus had prayed for him. Satan didn't desire to save him. Satan desired to sift him like wheat. Satan desires all humanity, and especially those who belong to the Lord, to sift them. Jesus the Savior, humanity's intercessor and redeemer, prayed for Peter. Peter still had a role to fulfill, an apostolic ministry ahead of him. And Peter would follow on later. In John chapter 21 and 18 to 19, following the Lord's resurrection, as he was interacting with the disciples there, we read, when they had finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? And he said, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. He said to him, feed my lambs. He said to him a second time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? And he said to him, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. And he said to him, tend my sheep. He said to him the third time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? And Peter was grieved because he said to him the third time, do you love me? And he said to him, Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you. And Jesus said to him, feed my sheep. There's more on this passage we'll note in a few weeks when we finally get to this passage as a key text for a sermon then. But here Jesus again is acknowledging that role of Peter. And in verse 18 to 19, then we read, truly, truly, I say to you, when you were young, you used to dress yourself and walk wherever you wanted. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hands, and another will dress you and carry you where you do not want to go. This he said to show by what kind of death he was going to glorify God. And after saying this, he said to him, follow me. Jesus alluding to the death, to the following that Peter would have in his death. Peter's hour would come. Death of Peter would follow. And so he was to follow on until that time. Tradition places his death on a cross upside down. Our hour will come also. And when we think about when our hour comes, will we glorify God in it? Will I glorify God in it? Seeking to glorify him now, we will glorify him then as we seek to continue to follow on with him. But Peter, he was certain in spirit, but he would struggle in the moment. As we continue on with our text here in John 13, and verses 37 to 38, Peter said to him, Lord, why can I not follow you now? I will lay down my life for you. And Jesus answered, will you lay down your life for me? Truly, truly, I say to you, the rooster will not crow till you have denied me 3 times. Peter, Lord, why not now? There was no hesitation here. I don't sense any hesitation here in Peter's willingness. Peter had a great desire to follow. Where his Lord was, that is where he wanted to be. He did not want to be separated from his Lord. Here we actually see amazing faith in Peter, a desire to follow Jesus without knowing exactly where Jesus was going. Some are guilty of possessing no desire to follow whatsoever. Some refuse to leave the way of sin and their own personal desires to follow Jesus. Others are simply plagued with indecision or procrastination, thinking, someday I will follow on with the Lord. But Peter here is stating with great faith, why can't I follow you now? He was willing to do so. He expressed a strong feeling of commitment to the Lord. A time of stumbling, though, was predicted. In Mark 14, 27 to 28, we read there, Jesus said to them, in addressing all of the disciples, you will all fall away, for it is written, I will strike the shepherd, and the sheep will be scattered, but after I am raised up, I will go before you to Galilee. Perhaps Peter felt Jesus implied that none of them had either the courage or faithfulness to follow him during this trying hour, but Peter himself felt very ready to do so. Peter imagined himself ready for anything that might come along. Peter wanted desperately to stay on with Jesus. In Mark chapter 14, verses 29 to 31, we read there from that same text. Peter said to him, "Even though they all fall away, I will not." And Jesus said to him, "Truly I tell you, this very night before the rooster crows twice, you will deny me 3 times. But he said emphatically, "If I must die with you, I will not deny you." And they all said the same. And then in Luke's account, Luke 22, verse 33, we read there, Peter said to him, "Lord, I am ready to go with you to prison and to death." If Peter was not allowed to follow, he'd go through the ordeal too. That was where his heart was. If he was only allowed to follow, he would follow through the ordeal too. And I don't doubt Peter's sincerity. I don't see his boast as being insincere. He was good-hearted. I see him as very well-meaning, well-intentioned. And he did draw the sword. In John 18, 10 through 11, there in the garden, we read there where he was ready to defend his Lord. He was courageous enough to draw the sword and try to stop Jesus' arrest. And he did follow at a distance, John 18, verse 15, and was eventually allowed into the courtyard. And John had gone in there and was able to get him into the courtyard. But where were the others? And so we see that there was courage on his behalf, and at least following at a distance. And the common struggle, though, was between the spirit and the flesh. As Jesus prayed in the garden, and he had taken along with him a little bit further than the other disciples, Peter, James, and John. In Matthew 26, verses 40 to 41, there we read, "And he came to the disciples and found them sleeping, that is Peter, James, and John. He found them sleeping, and he said to Peter, 'So, could you not watch with me 1 hour? Watch and pray, that you may not enter into temptation. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak.'" Do we find ourselves there also? The contrast between Judas and Peter is that Judas's choice to betray Jesus was an absolutely deliberate one, while what Peter did, that is, deny his Lord, was never his intention. His own words reveal it was the furthest thing from his mind, but in weakness, in a moment of weakness, he caved. Peter still had some growing to do before he was really ready to take up his own cross and to follow Jesus, even to death. He had some self-confidence to overcome. But Jesus knew Peter better than Peter did. The goodness he knew, the weakness he knew, the self-confidence Jesus knew. Someone has said, none are so near a fall as those who are so confident of their standing. Peter needed to rethink some things. And we need to be cautious also in our estimation of our own selves as we go on through life. As we are committed to the Lord, we're surrendered to the Lord, but still being careful that we are not as strong and as spiritual as we might perceive that we are. There needs to be a caution regarding our self-estimation, as Paul noted in Romans chapter 12 and verse 3, where we read, "For by the grace given to me, I say to everyone among you, not to think of himself more highly than he ought to think, but to think with sober judgment, each according to the measure of faith that God has assigned." And then in 1 Corinthians 10:12, we also read a caution there. "Therefore, let anyone who thinks that he stands take heed lest he fall." Uncertain human certainty. Sometimes we don't know until we're in the moment. Sometimes we don't know where our struggle might be or how strong we are until we are in the moment. You know, sometimes we'll express the statement, "I got this." Sometimes I don't. Sometimes we don't got this. But what we need to do in approaching life is, with God's help, I've got this. Let us always be looking to Him for the strength to carry us through whatever it is that we might be facing tomorrow. The unknowns that are ahead of ourselves. Keep looking at those things with a standpoint of our focus toward God and relying on His strength and His guidance, rather than thinking that we are so strong in and of ourselves. Later on, we find, as recorded in Luke 22, 61 to 62, when Peter did deny his Lord, that their eyes met. The eyes of the Lord and Peter met. Jesus looked toward him. But he would return. Peter would remember the Lord had told him that it would happen. But he would return. He would not. He wept, but he would not leave. Oh, to have Peter's desire to follow. We need to have that desire to follow. And when we stumble, have the courage to get up and to return and continue on with Him. We need to have that desire to follow. And why not now? If you're not following Jesus yet, why not now? Recognize now is your opportunity to begin that journey with Him. Paul, writing to the church in Corinth in 2 Corinthians 6, verses 1 through 2, we read there, working together with him then, we appeal to you not to receive the grace of God in vain. For he says, in a favorable time I listened to you, and in a day of salvation I have helped you. Behold, now is the favorable time. Behold, now is the day of salvation. Jesus came and gave Himself for us. God so loved the world that He sent His Son to die on our behalf. Are we responding to that great love? Have we been united with Christ in the waters of baptism to rise into that new life in Him, that journey of a new life in Him? If not, why not now? Why not begin that journey in Him now, to walk on, being strengthened and guided through each day with Him? Today is the opportunity. Now is the opportunity. We don't know what tomorrow might bring. Why not now?